I don't know how it shows up on your end, but yeah, I need this. I need this checklist of the 6 things I have to do before I start lecturing again. So pushing the recording button is one of them. So thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So again, we have a well-established system for rating foods. You know, we may or may not choose to use that system when we make decisions about what foods to eat or what to buy at the grocery store, right? So the leadership and energy and environmental design. This is a rating system for green buildings. So this is a system that tries to define the attributes of green building or sustainable buildings in a way that helps us make decisions about what is green and what is sustainable in the same way that those rating systems that we just saw for cars and Doritos, right, helps us make decisions this way. So decisions as well, right? So we're trying to certify, prove how well our buildings perform, right? LEED is a system that helps us do that, right? So it's not just saying that, hey, I built an efficient building, or hey, I built a green building or a sustainable building. We'll see that this actually does 2 things for us. A, it allows us to measure how well we're doing, but more importantly, it gives guidance to designers and members of the construction team about how well they're doing. It gives them guidance about how to make their building better. So LEED, leadership and energy and environmental design, is a building rating and certification system. It's a metric meant to quantify how green or how sustainable a building is. Right? It awards points based on credits in various categories that define a standard of performance. So we're measuring ourselves against a standard. And obviously the goal is to improve our building performance, to reduce the resources that our buildings use, to drive energy savings, water efficiency, reductions in CO2 emissions, right? We just saw how important it is, how efficiency and reducing CO2, how critical that is to the good of humanity. To also improve the indoor environmental quality and reduce waste. Right? These are all the attributes we talked about for green or sustainable buildings. And the LEED Green Building Rating System provides us criteria that we can measure our performance against. So why should we do that? Why should we worry about building green buildings? Well, probably the biggest thing is that buildings are a large source of carbon emissions, right? Depending on where you look, you'll see buildings are somewhere around 35 or 40%, right? So buildings are a large portion of CO2 emissions. Right? It's usually buildings, transportation, and industry. Those are kind of the 3 big things, 3 largest sources of CO2. Right, my data is a little out of date here, but probably hasn't changed too much here. So we see residential and commercial buildings are about 40% of the United States energy use, right? So it's a big pie slice. It's a good place it's a place that we need to look to reduce CO2 emissions. Why? Because this is what we do, right? 2 things. It's a big pie slice, and this is our business. This is what we do. Right, so done well, green buildings can reduce all the things we just talked about: energy use, CO2 emissions, water, solid waste. Again, green buildings or sustainable buildings done well the occupants in those buildings are healthier and more productive, right? Because we've thought about daylight, we've thought about ventilation, we've thought about indoor air quality, we've thought about the materials that were used in constructions, the paints and varnishes, the coatings. We've thought about the techniques that are used to clean. Right, we looked at the walk-off mats in the H building a couple weeks ago. We learned that Triton has a green cleaning program. Right, those are all things that go into making buildings healthier for the folks that are in the buildings. And why is that important? Well, it's important because we spend an awful lot of our time indoors. So how healthful our buildings are is important to us. Like green buildings, again, if they're done well, typically have better indoor air quality, better lighting. I thought that, again, in the H building, thoughtfully designed, good lighting design, nice daylighting, those nice study carrels. It is a thoughtfully well-designed building. So we're going to look at, in the LEED rating system, we're going to look at points on a 100-point scale, where 100 is, where more points is better. And those points in the scales are weighted to reflect their potential environmental impacts. And a project also has certain prerequisites that it has to meet in order to be certified. And as we'll learn, buildings get certified, professionals are accredited, right? So we'll learn about LEED, both certified buildings and accredited professionals. Right? We're working this semester on the LEED Green Associates, right? That's a professional accreditation that I will prepare you for. Again, LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, that's the rating system we're talking about. And the USGBC, the United States Green Building Council, that's the organization. We have different levels of LEED, certified, silver, gold, and platinum. So it's probably not unlike your credit card, right? If you really spend a lot of money, then you can get a platinum MasterCard or something like that, right? Same sort of thing. Platinum's better than gold. Right? We're measuring ourselves on a 100-point scale, and each of those different tiers or levels of certification requires a higher number of points to get there. Right? Where the goal here is to hopefully drive us to better and better, higher and higher standards of performance. That's the point. The credits are divided into categories. Like to try, again, we're looking to, again, this is a rating system. We're trying to drive positive attributes in a number of areas. So those credits are kind of organized into categories. Right? So we have the LEED credit category LT, or location and transportation, essentially discouraging us from greenfield or developing on undeveloped land, hopefully encouraging us to build, to adaptively reuse, or to build or renovate where the infrastructure already exists, where there's public transportation, rewards smart transportation choices, right? Helps us think about not only the energy use of the building, but the energy use that's involved in getting all the folks to and from the building, right? That's energy, that's CO2 as well, right? We need to think about both of those things. LEED credit category sustainable sites, or SS, sustainable sites. We want to minimize the building's impact on ecosystems and waterways, encourage smart water efficient landscaping, control stormwater runoff, right? And again, we'll talk about all these things as we go along, right? Light pollution, heat island effect, reduce impacts from the building construction. That's sustainable sites. Right, water LEED credit category WE, or water efficiency. Right, you want to encourage smarter, more efficient use of water both inside the building and out. Inside the building is we think about immediately, right? The toilet flushing and the urinals, and all the domestic uses of water. But in many buildings, water is also used outside the building. Right, at Triton, hopefully, when you Francis walked you out and showed you the cisterns out in the parking lot there that collect water off of the parking lot, and Triton uses that water for irrigation, for watering. Right, that is an exterior water use strategy or water reduction strategy. Like some more efficient appliances and fixtures and fittings inside the building, and water-wise landscaping outside the building. Right, here's our LEED credit category EA, or energy and atmosphere. Right, this is the energy use of the building, the CO2 emissions of the building. Has to do a lot of different things. Good question, Ayana. I don't know. I'll have to see what I can find out. Yeah, the cisterns. We'll see in a couple. We'll see in a couple of weeks, Ayana, why. One of the reasons why Triton did that. I mean, part of the reason Triton did that is because of our proximity to the Des Plaines River. So Triton had to do something to mitigate its stormwater impacts. So they looks like they chose wisely and picked a strategy that both mitigated stormwater and collected water that we could use for irrigation. So somewhere along the line, Triton made a good choice. But yes, you'll see why in a couple of weeks. Well, thanks for coming back, Jared. We'll see in a couple of weeks why we did that at Triton. Good question. Yeah, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat or shout them out. Right, that's how we learn, is by you asking questions and me trying to answer them, make me think on my feet. So again, energy and atmosphere, efficient design and construction, a well-constructed building envelope, insulation, windows, air tightness. These are all things that we'll learn about. Efficient appliances and systems, lighting, ventilation, renewable energy. Right, these are all things that will fall into the LEED credit category of energy and atmosphere. LEED credit category MR, or materials and resources, encourages the selection of sustainably grown, harvested, produced, and transported products and materials. Right, we're going to ideally be able to use locally sourced materials, sustainably grown and harvested materials. Right, wood is a good example of a if it's produced from a well-managed forest. Right, wood is a good building material. Going to reduce waste in the construction process. Right, all things that will be involved in LEED credit category MR, or materials and resources. LEED credit category IEQ, indoor environmental quality. Right, we're going to look at both the quality of the indoor air. We're also going to look at natural lighting, day lighting, and views, and acoustics, and all the things that make the building better, healthier, more productive. So the LEED rating system has many different building types, has standards, rating systems applicable to many different types of buildings. And LEED also has standards that apply throughout the entire life cycle of the building. Right? Life cycle means not only its design, its building or construction, but also its operation and maintenance. So you see here we have BD&C for building design and construction. We have LEED O&M for operations and maintenance. And again, different building types are covered by different LEED rating systems. We also have LEED for ID&C, interior design and construction. The reason for that is in some commercial office buildings, the core and shell is built separately from the interior. Right? Sometimes speculative buildings are built with a core and shell, right, the outside of the building and the elevators and the stairwells, and then tenants come and they fit out that building. So again, the LEED system recognizes that some commercial buildings are built that way and has rating systems for both the core and shell and the fit out of the interiors. The LEED rating system typically has a checklist or a scorecard to help us keep score. So this would be a scorecard or checklist for BD&C, building design and construction. And you see our different credit categories: location and transportation, sustainable sites. We put the pointer on here: water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, indoor environmental quality. Underneath there you have certain prerequisites. Prerequisites means something that you have to do. It's a must do. It's a requirement. Then underneath there you have points for other credits that are available in that credit category. And then you add them up, and then you see at the bottom here, it's a little hard to read: certified, silver, gold, platinum, right? So this is the BD&C, or new construction, building design and construction. And I put some links up here in case you are so inclined to poke around on their website, usgbc.org. Typically in the LEED rating system, there is documentation that gives more detail about the intent of the credit, and also some guidance, some details about designers and construction teams, how they will go about achieving that credit. Right, so here's an example. So LT, location and transportation, surrounding density and diverse uses. Right, the intent of that credit: to conserve land and protect farmland, blah blah blah, by encouraging development in areas with existing infrastructure. Right, I think that was one of the slides we looked at the first week, right? We want to build or renovate in a place that there are already buildings, right? So the LEED system recognizes that as well. And again, the documentation will give you guidance about the things that you have to do to achieve, to score those points, right? To achieve that credit. Again, the LEED documentation will spell all this stuff out. Again, the goal here is to give guidance to the designers and the construction team, try to define what exactly a green building is and make it measurable, make it something that you achieve this, you've done a better job. You've built a greener, sustainable building. That's the whole point of a green building rating system. We talked about LEED. Also looks at the life cycle of the building. Seems like somebody is coming and going here, having some connection problems. Maybe that's Ayana. You're coming and going here tonight, Ayana. Hopefully you're back to stay. This is the LEED O&M, or operations and maintenance. So again, this would be this has to do with the operation of the building. Again, the credits are put into these same categories, but since we are operating a building rather than designing and building a building, things look a little bit different. So what did I do? I just made a big mark on the screen. How did I do that? Right, we can't decide if the building is already built and we're operating the building. We don't have a choice about where the building is located. That decision has already been made. Or is that somebody else? Did somebody else make a mark on the screen? I didn't know you could do that.
Yes, sorry about that. I didn't know either.
Oh well, we learn together here, Fred.
Sorry.
Not a problem at all. We're learning together. Hopefully, I'm teaching you things, and along the way, by the questions you ask and your reaction and your discussion board posts and that sort of thing, that I learned something as well. Right? I learned from your experiences. My point of view is enhanced by you folks as well. So again, in the case of LEED O&M, right, the building already exists. The decision about where it's located has already been made by somebody else. But again, if you're operating the building, there's certainly things you can do to encourage alternative modes of transportation to that building. I think Triton, yes, Triton is not located in the most convenient place, but we do have a bus line that does run to Triton. We do have bike racks. We do have some things that we have tried to do to encourage people to get to Triton by things other than driving their car. Although I think we send mixed messages because we have this giant sea of parking lots around our buildings, but so be it. Right, so LEED is a example of a building rating system. Again, we're going to learn a lot. We're going to dive into the details about LEED. But it's a standard that defines what constitutes reduced impact on the natural environment and conducive to human health. Right, so we're trying to not just say we're green or sustainable. We're trying to measure it against a standard. We're measuring against an absolute standard. So you saw a couple slides ago, some details in that particular credit, and we're measuring our building's performance against that standard. And the LEED rating system has versions applicable to many different building types, runs throughout the entire building's cycle. Right? In the case of LEED, more points is better. It's always easy for us as Americans to understand, and many of our games and sports, more points is better. But LEED is not the only system that is out there for rating building performance. Here's one, the HERS rating system, Home Energy Rating System. This is meant for new residential construction, kind of focuses on energy performance. So if you were out looking for a new home, you might be able to find the HERS rating of the home. You probably could find it if the builder has given some thought to building an efficient home. You might find the HERS score or the HERS rating, and maybe not. In the case of HERS, lower score is better, right? You see way at the bottom here, here's a zero energy home would get a HERS score of 0. That would be a great house. Energy Star is also a rating system that compares to other buildings. So again, it's measured against a database of similar buildings. It's a relative measurement. Energy Star is typically used for commercial buildings and typically focuses on energy performance. In the case of HERS, higher score is better. You'll see in the LEED O&M system, there's a tie-in to Energy Star. So again, when I was one of my previous positions, I worked for a big company. We had lots and lots of buildings all around the country. We benchmarked those buildings. We compared their performance to each other. We took the utility data and other attributes of that building, and we, put it into this federal database, and that allowed us to compare our buildings to each other and allowed us to focus our efforts on the buildings that were the lower performing buildings. Right, LEED is probably the first major building rating system, but it's not the only ones. Other ones exist out there. You see some of them, Green Globes or GREEN, Architecture 2030, Living Building Challenge, right? Other folks are doing the same sort of thing. So why would a building owner, why would a entity like Triton, why would they go through this process? Why would they certify their green building? Many organizations, have made public commitments to be green or responsible. We just talked about greenwashing there. A lot of this is the way that companies can actually positively demonstrate the good work that they're doing. Again, the big company that I used to work for, we set a public goal of so much percentage of our square footage will be LEED certified. Right, so that was something we could show the public, and it's also that's something that drove us internally on various architectural and energy teams within the company to make our buildings perform better. So that's a big reason why buildings get certified. Right, owners have made public commitments. To some extent, owners do that to comply with government incentives or requirements. Like in the case of Triton College, part of the reason that H building was LEED certified is that the state of Illinois said, okay, college and university, if you're receiving state of Illinois support for this project, it has to be LEED certified, right? So that's a way that governments, building codes can drive the adoption of green building standards, is by mandating or requiring those things to be done. The other thing is that it makes sense. It makes economic sense, right? If we have a building that performs better, uses less energy, operating costs are lower. If we have a building that performs well from an indoor air quality standpoint, from a desirability standpoint, it potentially improves the value of that building. It creates advantage in the marketplace, right? A commercial real estate company can say, hey, Mr. or Ms., I know you're looking to lease space. Why don't you lease space in this building? Because it's a LEED Platinum building. It's a great place for you to rent space, to lease, because it's a great building, right? You're creating advantage in the marketplace. So those are some of the reasons why building owners would pursue building certification. What does a green building look like, right? Well, we looked at the Triton H building a couple weeks ago. Right, some of the things we didn't go up on the roof, but if you're in the architecture studio, you can look across, look north, and look at some of the mechanical systems on the roof. Look at the white roof that absorbs less heat from the sun, reduces air conditioning costs. Those are some of the things that make the H building LEED certified. Right, we didn't see those things, unfortunately. We saw our dark sky compliant light fixtures, right, less energy for the same amount of illumination. Right, those are things that help make the H building LEED certified. We saw the rain gardens, right? One strategy, multiple benefits. We reduce stormwater runoff. We provide habitat for pollinators. Those plants take CO2 out of the atmosphere and put it in the ground, sequestration. And it's also pleasant, it's beautiful, right? Triton did that for a number of reasons. We saw our fritted glazing, how the north elevation was treated differently, excuse me, the south elevation was treated differently than the north elevation. Talked about our vestibules, reduce that loss of air that's already heated your air conditioning. Looked at the daylighting. We didn't walk up on the second floor. Unfortunately, we were a little bit pressed for time. We have daylighting up on the second floor as well. We have this glazing high along the walls of the classroom that help get some of that natural light into the classrooms on the second floor. Have our walk-off mats. Reduced need for cleaning is less chemicals. Right, we'll go back and talk about this again. But I did, I think one year we took the H building tour and somebody said, well, how did they do? So I had to go back and dig that up. So we'll come back to this again. But the H building is certified. Right, got 51 out of 110 points, so it's certified. And as we get into this, we'll go back and look at some of these things again. So what are some other examples of green buildings? If you're in Oak Park, like Ayana and I, who's jumping in and out of a connection here, right? We have the Austin Gardens Environmental Education Center, right? That's a LEED Platinum building in downtown Oak Park. We have also in Oak Park, the Public Works building. We used to tour this building years ago, but the woman who was our contact there no longer works for the village, so we don't get to go there anymore. Okay, remember this graph from last week? Again, I'm going to try to tie our thoughts back to this. Keep us focused on what we have to do, right? Green is buildings. That's our swim lane. We're construction professionals. We worry about buildings. Right, here's our no new sales of fossil fuel boilers. Right, all the things that we need to do our part to reduce the amount of CO2 that's going into the atmosphere to help achieve these goals, right? So in light of this, some folks beside LEEDs are setting bigger and bolder goals. Architecture 2030 is one of those groups that's setting bigger, bolder goals. You could certainly argue that, in light of this new knowledge about the fact that we have to reduce CO2 by 50, we have to cut it in half by 2030, right? 8 years from now. Some organizations are setting bigger, bolder goals. Right? Architecture 2030 is one of them. Right? Their rating system has net zero or carbon neutrality by 2030. Right? Aligns well with what we just looked at there. Another group, the Living Building Challenge, also has bigger, bolder goals, both net zero energy and net zero water. One thing about the Living Building Challenge is that their certification looks at that actual data. That's one of the drawbacks of the LEED rating system, is that it doesn't necessarily look at how the building actually performs. That's one thing that the Living Building Challenge does. Again, these are alternative building rating systems. So what does net zero energy means? Sorry for a lot of words on the slide here, but in essence, it means that over the course of a year, the energy of that building is met with on-site renewables. So we get to a net zero building, right? Just like we saw in our 3 pillars. We make the building as efficient as we possibly can. A good building envelope, efficient systems and appliances, good operations and maintenance practices. And then what energy usage that still remains that we address with on-site renewables, right? That's a zero energy or a net zero building, right? That's the direction we're striving for here. We can do the same thing with water, a net zero water building. This one's a little bit harder to wrap our minds around. But again, we're trying to minimize the amount of water that we take from a freshwater source and treat and return that water back to us, back to where we got it from. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing for much of the rest of the semester. We're going to be talking about the LEED rating system in more detail. We're talking about LEED Green Associates and preparing you to, if you so choose, sit for the LEED GA exam. Again, I'm going to try my best to tie this together with the imperatives of global climate change. So that's my challenge, is to learn about the LEED rating system and also help you learn about how to make buildings, how to design and build and operate and maintain buildings that are dramatically more efficient to help us get after these global climate change goals. Any questions? Okay, well, I've actually finished up a couple minutes